Today on Evolution Woodworks, we're going to replace this old tapering jig with something just a little bit nicer. Let's get started. I've been working on plans for a new console table project with tapered legs, and I realized that old jig just wasn't going to work out well for legs that were that long. I thought about just buying one and getting on with the table build, but where's the fun in that? For the base, I grabbed the bottom piece of melamine from an epoxy table form and started cutting it down to size. Made it about 9 inches wide and roughly 32 inches long to handle most anything from a small cabinet foot to a full-size tapered leg. For the fence, I just grabbed a scrap of 3/4 inch plywood, cut it to match the length of the sled base, and ripped it down to about 2.5 inches wide. The theme here is just to use up leftovers from around the shop and not spend a lot of money on this. The hardware will be the only real cost, and even that's just parts I already had from other projects that didn't get used. Alright, I need to lay out some slots in this base plate. Gonna put one in the middle, one on each end. Then we'll run these T-bolts through that with some wing nuts on top. That's gonna let us lock the fence down. Then we can pivot this to whatever angle we need. And on top of that, we'll run some slots in the fence itself so we can put our hold downs on. Once we get that done, we just need a cleat on the end, make a runner for it to fit in the miter slot, and we're pretty much done. I'm going with 3 slots for adjustment bolts on this one because of the length. I've seen some with only 2, but I felt like the pressure of the clamps may pull up on the middle of the fence enough that a piece might get loose or something weird. So just for a little extra insurance, I just went with 3. I set up a guide fence for the router and used a 3/8 straight cut bit for the T-bolt to pass through. Then I came back with a 1/2 inch bit, set the depth stop just a little deeper than the flange on the bottom of the bolt, and repeated that cut. I just wanted to mention real quick, I've been sharing some more behind the scenes clips and updates over on Patreon. Links in the description if you want to check that out, and of course, a big shout out to those who are already supporting what I'm building over there. Once I had the slots cut in the base, I used that as a template to lay out the bolt holes in the fence, and then I drilled those out on the drill press. If you haven't seen it yet, I made a 2-part video series on how I built this table, fence, and cabinet for the drill press. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. Alright, so now you can see that's going to slide back and forth. I can set that to whatever angle I want. And I just need to run slots in here the same as I did this way. So we can add these, hold our piece down, and yeah, we're good to go. For the slots in the fence, I set up the router table with the same 3/8 and 1/2 inch bits that I'd used on the base. I marked a starting point in the fence to make a plunge cut, and then I used the end of the fence as my stopping point for that. Once I had one side done, I could just flip it around and cut the other side. I did the larger recess slot in one pass, and then I reset for the through cut and made that in several passes, just raising the bit height until I had cut all the way through. And here's the final result. You can see how the larger slot holds the T-bolt head in place so it doesn't spin when you crank down on the thumb nuts. Alright. Let's get a runner on here, end cap on our fence, and good to go. For the miter guide, I usually prefer to use an adjustable aluminum bar, but since I didn't have one laying around, I decided to just keep it simple and use a piece of hard maple. I ripped off a piece about 3/8 of an inch thick, and then I made a few passes through the saw until I had a good snug but still sliding fit in the miter slot. Once I was happy with the fit, I used the thin piece that I'd ripped off earlier to raise it above the table and tacked it on with some CA glue. Once I had that locked into place, I drilled and screwed it just to make sure it doesn't come loose. I I set the fence up here so the base set just slightly over the blade so I could cut that flush later. I knocked the sharp edges off with some sandpaper, and then I cut the ends of the miter bar flush. I used the longer piece that I just cut off to add this little hook to the end of the fence with some screws so I have a positive stop to hold the stock in place while I'm cutting. After applying some hard wax to the runner to help it slide, I took it back to the table saw and cut the edge off flush. That's when I remembered that I needed one more thing. I grabbed this piece of maple dowel that I had laying around from some old project and cut out a couple handles. I just rounded the tops off a bit on the sander, and then I drilled and screwed those to the fence. I ran a poll a few weeks ago, and most of you said to can the music and just talk, so that's what I did for this one. Did you like it better without? Let me know in the comments. And for the few of you that said shut up and let the saws talk, well, I'm just going to keep talking anyway, so sorry. All right, let's go give it a shot. All right, so we're just going to pretend that this is our leg. So we want to go from, well, let's do a 1/2 inch taper on it. So we'll put a mark here on the back side at 2 inches. Mark on the front end at 1.5 inches. Now, just need to line that mark up. The edge of our sled. Clamp this baby down. Try to make sure you don't get your clamp out where it's going to get cut. All right, so now you can see we've got a nice tapered leg. If you need to make more of those, obviously everything's locked in. You don't have to worry about readjusting the fence or anything to get this thing lined up. And if you're doing a square leg or a rectangle that you need to do 2 sides, you can just roll it up on its edge and cut another side of it. I'm going to put this to good use on the next project, and that's going to be our console table. So I hope you'll stick around for that. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.